Oh boy. You know, many times here in America, we sit back and we talk about racial equality and we talk about women's rights and we talk about a litany of different rights from different groups, all justifiably in many cases. And in some cases, those same people within those groups are oppressors of their own. Even more, you want to say predators. Well, I saw something that was not only contentious, but it shows us the area where we're at in society nowadays when it comes to a lot of women and their preconceptions within the Black and Latin race about men of color and their intentions and the criminality that must be associated with them. Even when many of these men are 9-to-5 workers, bust their butts every day, and etc., etc., etc. One of those men being Ryan Coogler. Yes, the famed director of Black Panther, a now acclaimed movie, held it at a certain prestige of this movie that some would even mistakenly say it's the best in the Marvel series. And he decided to go into an Atlanta bank, and this is what I want to make very clear to you guys. This wasn't a random accident. I've seen stories of this that has happened in Mississippi. I've seen stories like this that has happened in Atlanta several times at multiple different banks. Wells Fargo was one of them that I saw before, and I believe it was Young Thug, I believe at the time, that had a problem there. And many other different artists. If you don't know, a lot of music artists, a lot of Marvel movies are shot in the Atlanta area, adding to the economy, not only of Atlanta, but adding a whole bunch of jobs. I've seen these stories happen a couple of times where these guys go into the bank and they withdraw whatever amount of money. I saw one just as recently with Lil Bootsy, and the same thing happened with him. For some reason or another, there is some regard taken up that these men cannot possibly make that money based on the stigma that's been put out in society on Black and brown men of multiple different ethnic backgrounds. I want to emphasize that. I've seen the same thing with an Indian man that goes to the airport, or an Indian man that starts praying, or a Middle Eastern man that may be dressed in their country's garb and therefore heighten people's suspicion about what their intentions may be. And I've seen this done to them by their own people, mostly people that are assimilated to becoming an American and diving in and joining in the American culture fully. Ryan Coogler went into a bank in Atlanta, and I'm not sure what exact bank it is in Atlanta, and he decided that he wanted to withdraw $12,000. Now, as many of us know, Ryan Coogler is worth way more than $12,000. And if you know the Atlanta area, especially if it was downtown Atlanta, which I've been to Atlanta, I've worked in Atlanta, you would know this. You would know not only is Atlanta a small area, downtown specifically, it's a small area condensed with a lot of buildings, being CNN and Travel Center, Birds where they play, etc., etc., etc. Ryan Coogler passed a note to the teller, and he said to that teller, I need to withdraw $12,000. Now, this is the highlight of everything. If you're wondering, most of y'all, what was it, a white woman? Was this racial discrimination? Well, what was it? This was a black woman that ultimately ended up calling the police on Ryan Coogler because she said that his activity was suspicious. And as I read here, you guys are going to understand exactly what I mean. So once again, this comes from Zach Lindley of News One, and I want to read this out to you. Bank of America employee who called cops on Ryan Coogler was a black woman. It be your own people. Apparently, the teller thought the Coogler's clear and concise note asking for discretion read, I'm robbing you, when translated into Black Conda dialect. There's a picture of Ryan Coogler right there. Ryan Coogler does not look like a criminal. You know, the whole banking while black thing has gotten out of hand. The well-known black filmmaker who directed one of the biggest blockbuster hits in the last decade can't even make a discreet withdrawal from his bank without being accused of criminal activity. In today's episode of Wakanda is this. Black Panther director Ryan Coogler and his associates were detained in Atlanta after Coogler stopped at a Bank of America to make a legal withdrawal of his account, according to a police report obtained by TMZ. It all started back in January when Coogler walked into a bank wearing sunglasses and a face mask and handed the teller a withdrawal slip with a note written on it that read, I would like to withdraw $12,000 cash from my checking account. Please do the money count somewhere else. I like to be discreet. Understandably, why? Ryan Coogler is a well-recognized face. Apparently, the teller thought Coogler's clear and concise note asking for discretion read, "I'm robbing you," when translated into Black Honda dialect. That's right, the teller thought something was suspicious about a black man handed them a slip that said black man's account information on it because it included a note being low-key when counting out his money. I want to emphasize his money. So the teller called the police, and according to TMZ, the cops detained 2 people waiting outside for Ryan in the SUV, and then went in and brought RC himself, Ryan Coogler, himself out in handcuffs. Now, I know what y'all are thinking. This has to be white shenanigans written all over it. After all, Bank of America has a long history of racial accusations due to the whiteness run amok. But in this case, the teller who called police was described by the police report as a pregnant black woman. I want to say again, a pregnant black woman. I wonder what gender she's having, a girl or a boy. That's an interesting question right there. Damn, where do I begin? First of all, sis, you never get into Wakanda. You'll never get into Wakanda like this. That's hilarious. You have to wait in the kind of customs area until Wakanda agents assure you ain't the op. Secondly, what kind of D-list Tyler Perry directed heist films have you been watching? No bank robberies in real life begin with someone handing a teller a note. And even if this was a thing, the note would have read something like, "Give me all your money or I'll shoot." The note you got requesting that you be discreet while withdrawing 12 racks of the customer's own money who robs a bank by giving a teller a deposit slip with his account number on it. Lastly, calling the cops before considering any of this is straight up Karen shit. Anyway, Coogler told TMZ everything is cool between him and the bank and his bank now. The situation should have never happened, he said. However, Bank of America worked with me and addressed this to my satisfaction. We have moved on. Still, Coogler was reportedly pissed to the cops who released him after realizing it was all a big and stupid as fuck mistake. He asked for all of their badge numbers. This all goes to show you no amount of fame, success means a black person won't be profiled. Also, sometimes it be your own people. You know, this is not only amazing to me that this happened back in January and it's now here in March and we're not even getting any word on it, but what even more so bothered me was the fact that, you know, we have a lot of women, different ethnicities of women too, that run around and talk about fair rights. They run around and talk about how they want to be treated equal. Well, what I see is a lot of these women are less than equal. And even if they're not directly upfront and say it to your face that they believe in these types of theories and these types of presumptions and things like that. What I find all too many times, and this is what all men are victims of this. All men are all different ethnicities. What I find more times than often is the same aggression and pitfalls that they say are pointed towards them, they in turn use those same pitfalls, traps, and in this case an accusation, and pin it on men. And some of the most nefarious, some of the most insidious, nasty ways that I've ever seen in a very long time. I can't remember one time in my life, except in the past 5 years, when it's been so passive aggressive how women of color are to other men of color. And they're very selective when they do this. You have to have a certain look for them. You have to have a certain tone of voice and octave for them. And based off these things, they run their qualification cheat sheet based on, are you worthy, or da-da-da-da. Now, what you'll find is the same people they're trying to impress, which I find very often. I grew up around Italians and Greeks mostly. And what I find is I always can spot one of these guys. And I've said it before, I can always spot one of these hood boogers when they're trying to blend in. And I have to say it just like that, hood boogers trying to blend in. Meaning any other time outside of work, they are one complete different personality. They're like, hey girl, ah ha ha ha, you got that right, blah, 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 blah. As soon as they get to work, a second personality kicks in, which is really a part of being a sociopath, to be honest with you, but that's another discussion. And this personality, once it reaches work, is somebody totally different. They have a new set of values. They have a different set of SKUs of which they make decisions. They have a different set of even personality, which is quite odd. I mean, could you imagine waking up with somebody and by the time 8 o'clock hits around, they have now turned and altered into a totally different person? Well, under the psychological book, the DSM-2 to be specific, that would be considered a psychopath. And I don't think too many doctors will argue with that, put up the press and put under the microscope and present it in any court of law. Or any doctrine or any psychiatrist, I would find it having a hard time having them disagree with that. This is a mental disorder. This woman was pregnant, and I want to highlight that because I don't know the gender of the baby that she was having. But if the gender of the baby, let's just say for theory based, and let's say it was a boy, how would you feel if someone took that same initiative and added it towards your child? You say, as you, and I don't know if she's a first-time mother or not, but as you're becoming a mother, you have to realize that Ryan Coogler wasn't born via asexual. He was born to two parents, which means in turn that he has a mother too. And I would think to myself, how would this guy's mother feel? But then I had to bring up this question. What I also find is a lot of women of color and their bout and their race to become and mimic the white woman or become the new white woman. I think a lot of these women think. And what I mean by that is a total replacement as a spouse for the white man. There's a lot of women out here that have this initiative. There's a lot of them that I can name that are right here on YouTube that you watch daily, that we complain about daily and do stories about daily. So this is not a theory. This is something that can easily be proven by a YouTube search if you're not familiar. These women actually attack on other women too. I was in a grocery store maybe 2 or 3 days ago, and I can remember there was this woman, and I saw her walking around the grocery store earlier. She's a rather tall woman, so she drew my attention. And I won't necessarily say she was unattractive, but she was maybe a strong 6, if that. And she was she had overly too much makeup on, which was obvious. That made her stick out as well. And and to be fair, I don't think she needed that much makeup. I think she would have stood out a little bit better without all the makeup. But, you know, everybody makes their own choices. Everybody has their own style. Who am I to judge? I have no problem with that. I wasn't interested. And I could rest tight with that and not mean anything malicious towards this woman based off that fact. Well, it just so happens when I was checking out in the line in the grocery store, this woman was in front of me. And I didn't go to the other line because it wasn't as closest to, I would say on my side, I was coming from the right-hand side of the store. And I'm assuming she was coming either down the line or the left-hand side of the store. So me going into the right-hand lane would have been more convenient for me. I walk into the line and then I see her show up shortly afterwards. And she kept looking back at me and I kept feeling weird. It really made me feel uncomfortable. I was like, why does this woman intentionally keep turning back looking at me? And she just kept looking at me. And then as the woman is ringing up my stuff, she's looking, I'm trying to figure, and I'm thinking she's looking, trying to see how I'm going to pay, which is one of the most intrusive behaviors I've ever seen in minority people. I've seen this demonstrated by Latin people. I've seen this demonstrated by Black people. I've seen this demonstrated by countless amounts of minorities. I very rarely see it done by whites, and I'm not giving them a pat on the back, but I'm telling the truth. And if you really want to go into deep, that's where you get this pocket watching that goes on online. You know, people calling out people's dollar amount and how much they're worth and what they do and blah, 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 blah. So I started getting uncomfortable even more. And then as I'm obviously not giving this woman the attention she wants from me, she then turns around, I guess within that anger, realizing that she's not getting the attention she wants from me. And she starts directing it to this young Black girl or Haitian girl that's in line. And I can tell, everybody can tell because of the tone of her voice. The tone of her voice sounds very angry. The tone of her voice sounds very complex and out to prove something. And The only thing I heard the girl say, and that would warrant that, and that didn't warrant her response, was the girl asked her, just like they asked everybody else, "Ma'am, do you want a bag?" Which you have to purchase the bags. The bags are like, I think 5 cents or something like that. And so evidently this woman was struck by that, and that took her attention off me back to the girl. And I started noticing that this older woman, because she was older. She was like probably, I'm going to say 50-ish, upper 50-ish. So she started being unnecessarily rude to this young girl, and almost talking to her in a condescending way that I was like, you out of anybody should know what it's like to be her, because you were her. I'll say that again. You out of anybody should know what it's like to be her, because you were her. Meaning you were a young girl at one time. And it just totally baffled my mind. It blew my mind. And I said to myself, you know what? I'm just going to observe this. And my first, if I had not been busy in line paying for my groceries, I probably would have pulled out my camera and started recording it. Because it was that. And there's numerous other situations that I just observed socially. You know, this is part of sociology. If you've never studied it and you're getting ready to go to college, don't elect for a liberal arts degree like I did. But make sure that you opt for something around the realm of sociology. It'll teach you a lot about the interactions with people and what to avoid as a reaction most of the time. Sometimes it's this, you can't. Anyway, that's another story. I pulled my basket out because we're not allowed to take the basket with us, of course. And I have a reusable bag, so I always like to pack my groceries myself. I know how to do this. I'm pretty good at packing things. So I pack up my groceries and I stand to the side, and now I'm at the lower end of where I just left the counter. This woman pulls out her bag, pulls out her basket. The machine's right there. She pays for her stuff. She is continuing to be nasty to this girl. She walks past me as she's pulling out of the store, as she's leaving the store. She walks past me because she has to, because I'm sitting there packing my groceries. And she gives me the most evil, dirty, spiteful, just pure Beelzebub, straight in a bat on a sled with gasoline set on fire, devilish look. Straight out of Dante's Inferno, you know. And I was just like, wow, this is an evil woman. Now, I'm not here to bash women or anything like that, but I just want to sit and content that there's a lot of women, both black and Spanish, that walk around with this type of attitude that is condescending, violent, vindictive, assumption-wise, it's presumptuous. And I could add a whole bunch of other different terms to it that I just don't have time to do. This is something that's internal. And for this woman to sit around and think the apt decision for her, instead of alerting security, or maybe alerting a fellow bank employee or teller, or her manager for that matter, she opted to do what she thought was best at that moment, which was to call the police. Now, she based this off of people, I'm guaranteeing, because bank tellers don't make that much. My aunt used to work at Bank of America for the longest. And it wasn't up until she started getting into the senior positions that she even moved from her apartment and bought a house. And at that time, this is my mother's younger sister. And at that time, I won't say she lived in a really bad area, but she didn't live in one of the greatest areas in comparison to us. So I was like, you know what? This woman probably caps in under $60,000, $50,000 a year, somewhere around there. Not a lot of money. And I said to myself, this must be her interactions, and this is where her real personality comes in, and they bring their real personality to work. She is used to interacting with people that live around her like this, passive aggressive, alcohol. I would be guaranteed this woman is sprued out at least once or twice in her life. I'll call the police. And that's why she was quick to do that. See, a lot of people, and I'm so glad that the police are starting to see this more and more and more. A lot of people opt out on weaponizing the police. And unless you're someone that's educated, you will your interaction once they show up will be that of being flustered, like most people would be. Who wants to be called, that the police called on them and have to deal with an unnecessary problem? But if you're not well equipped to articulate yourself, you could have a problem. And that person later on will be laughing at you as you head out the door with these police, which I think is a very insidious maneuver. And you should really question someone that does things like this, because once again, I would say they hinder passive aggressiveness, microaggressive, and possibly potentially a psychopath or sociopath. These are the definitions of these people that maneuver themselves like that. But yes, there are people out here that try to weaponize the police, and they've gained this by watching white people and believing that racist white people, usually poor, usually uneducated, usually bad genetic-based whites, just like there's one in every different ethnicity, they all have their groups. This is a tier system. These people are so innately feel that are in this segment, I want to underline segment, that they have developed a new terminology they can always go back to, if you really want to reference it, the Willie Lynch letter. It's a set of protocols that you use. And you use these protocols to, one, irate someone. Two, once you get irate, there's now warranted resistance, a warranted reason to implement resistance. And once that resistance has been put in place, if you falter that resistance, now there's more aggressive and extreme measures that can be taken place, including you getting mace, shot, whatever. If you're not coherent to this type of terminology, the Latins, and I'm going to say who else? Africans, and many other people that have been colonized throughout the world, whether it be for whatever European group, the Dutch, English, Spaniards, whatever. A lot of people lose the contention. These are all Eastern European countries. They went into other countries, and now they make up the populations that you call a Dominican, which, if you want to call Dominicans, the German Dominican Flyers. They were the ones that made up the island. There's Dominguez. He was German. He wasn't brown skin. He wasn't white. He was Germanic. They made up the Dominican Republic. If you look at Cuba, if you look at Puerto Rico, if you look at any of the Caribbean islands, Jamaica, made up by the English. It was a colony of the English up until a couple years ago. They wanted independence. Now Jamaica is an independent country, the Barbados. It was mostly ran by Eastern Europeans, and all the other countries, the Dutch, you name it, Belize, all of them, all have origins of Eastern European standard or English standard. These were tricks and things that they taught to implement control, dominance, if you want to say. And if you're a weak person, you would succumb to this dominance. And if you weren't, you would rebel and fight, like many did and died. Some jumped off of slave ships, including some of those same Indians, Bangladeshis that they are called, but once a part of Smyrna and Asia. All these people adapted the same strategies that were once used against them in populace, and they use it against other people, notably those within their own culture. Right now in Latin culture, there's a war going on between Latinx and new immigrant Latinos. These new immigrant Latinos that are coming to the country are looked upon as Latinx. When I mean by Latinx, those that have been here maybe 1 or 2 generations versus someone just arriving here. Not very skilled in the culture, language, writing skills, etc. And they look down upon them. And they actually make them a secondary tier within Latino culture. And Black culture, they do it as well. Them being here a lot more longer than any other minority group in this country. Over, 500 years? They've been in this country alongside whites mostly the whole time, and American Indians. Let's not forget them. The next will only be on that list that you could even point out that would be a purity would be Mexicans. which many parts of the southern United States we all know really is Mexico, including California, Arizona, Texas specifically, which they took in the Spanish-American War. When we look at our women unilaterally, there's a race for them for some reason or another to reach to the top. A lot of this has to do with the influence of what's in media or whatever, and it's skewed these women's minds into all of them thinking that they are princesses, even when many of them are frogs. Purity, ribbit frogs, inside and out. Demons, some of them narcissists, some of them just cantankerous, some of them sociopaths, psychopaths. I heard a story that Corey Holcomb threw out about a woman in Florida that got mad at her boyfriend and decided to throw their pug dog out the window. Not only did she throw the pug dog out the window 7 flights up, and this dog died on impact. It's a very small dog if you're not familiar with a pug. Not only that, but she threw the dog, the intentions of why she threw the dog and what happened ultimately. There were 2 pug dogs. One of the pug dogs had cancer and was in a stage where he wasn't doing very well. She thought that was a dog that she was tossing because that dog was on its way out the door anyway, in so many words. She ended up throwing the wrong dog, and she actually threw the healthy dog out of the 2. The dogs look similar. What I have to ask you is, why would you throw a dog out the 7th floor window, regardless of its health state? So when I see a woman do something like this to Ryan Coogler, it only ushers in one thought to me and what I've been saying. You have to realize you are now being demonized by your own women. You have to realize that they believe that your intentions are ill-gotten, blase blah, whatever the case may be, all based on one factor: their horrible interaction with men in their life. Many of these women have never had a father in their life. Many of these women have never had good uncles. And if they have had a father in their life, many times the father's been a criminal himself, in and out of jail, abused the mom, maybe possibly abused them. Maybe the men in their area, in their neighborhood that they're frequent with, they've grown up, that these men have been abusive, sexually assaulted them, physically assaulted them, verbally assaulted them, lifelong, made fun of them because they were smart. There's a litany of different possibilities and answers. The point being, a lot of these women now as adults do not lose this trauma. And the real question here, and I think the real problem here, is a lot of these women are not being prompted to go get the psychological help that they actually need. Besides all the fake smiles, besides all the fake voices and all the fake octaves. Hello, how are you guys doing? Oh, me? My name's Maria Lopez. Yeah. Besides all the fake everything that goes on with them and the acting roles that they take with them to work, to their professions, to their jobs, most of the time, the nurses, salute to all of them. The professionalism that they exhibit when they're with their colleagues is not the same professionalism that they exhibit when they are with the public, especially if the public looks like them. And that's what I'm finding more and more and more when it comes to Black and Latin women, when they are individually dealing with their own. Now, this is not totality. I've been in many of different places on Fifth Avenue and you name it that have been very nice to me. You understand? When I come in, very receptive to me as well. But I've also been in many more places where I've had interaction at a lower tier, where we're talking about Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or whatever the case may be. And there's a woman of color in there. I have been in a line, and the person in front of me, if they are white, they will be treated one way. And then when she gets to me, she wants to go back to a hood personality. That's someone operating in 2 different personalities. That's not natural. And if you don't pay attention to that, you don't see that, there might be something wrong with you, or you might be vested in being used to that type of treatment. It is not okay anymore for you to come into my store as a woman and I mistreat you, give you lower quality of service regardless of your race, as it is for you, or gender, as it is for you to do the same to me based on my gender. I think more times than enough, this is based off gender. I don't think it's specifically based off of race every time, but it's definitely based off gender. This passive aggressive, microaggressive tendencies. Another thing that they'll do is they'll pretend like they didn't hear your order, which I think a lot of owners of these companies should take attentive to. They are messing with the dollar-based system right there. If there are not only nothing but 3 people that walk out of there a day is being upset with that type of treatment, you have to realize that those 3 people come in daily for 30 days out of the month. You are substantially missing a lot of money added to the base and the common denominator here, which is the gains of the company. Now you have 10 stores acting like this at a minimum nationally. We're talking about hundreds of thousands and maybe millions of dollars being lost a year because one of your employees made the decision that they are in charge of how the company's reflection of how they treat people. Because I know this is not in the manual. I know this is not in the employee's manual. Ryan Coogler, I am sorry this happened to you. I could go on and on about this. But one thing I have to say to you fellas, and I want you, especially young men, to pay attention to, younger men to pay attention to, is when you are being treated like this, not only walk out of there, don't allow no matter how bad you want that coffee, no matter how bad you want whatever's in that store, walk out of that store, ask for that person's name. If they refuse to give you their name, take the number down for the store via Google. Don't wait for a manager to come. Just walk right out. And look at the register or look at the time, note that down, and call the corporate office. Start filming if you can. That'll add on. Indiscreetly, excuse me. Don't do it to the point where they recognize it because it'll alter their behavior. No, you want to keep the phone down low and the audio is just as good because there's no way in the audio they're going to be able to say it's not me. Or before you walk off, hold the camera up and make sure you get them in the visual too. I guarantee you it works. It's something that you guys have seen me utilize several times now to prove my point. Get people fired. I want to put you in a position, if you feel like you can treat people like that, I want to make sure that your next employer takes this into consideration as well. And I need it to be documented why you were relieved of your job because of that behavior. Now, you wanted me to have a bad day. I want you to have a bad life. Guys, make sure you like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Donate. Cash App link is in the description box. And Ryan Coogler, can't wait to see Black Panther 2. I'll talk to you guys later.